Hello, teachers, parents, and educational leaders, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Down the B.E.S.T. Now, during this episode, you will get a peek into the members-only area where I have tons of resources to help you make math fun, make it click, and make it stick. There should be a link somewhere around this video where you can learn more. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's get to it, and let's break down the standard. Welcome to Breaking Down the B.E.S.T, a video series dedicated to breaking down Florida's B.E.S.T standards for math. So grab something to write with and maybe even a snack. This looks good. And don't forget to put a smile on your face. There you go, I see you. And let's dive into today's B.E.S.T standard. Hey everyone, my name is Sarah McCarthy and I am so excited that you are taking time out of your crazy busy nonstop schedule to join me as we break down the following standard. Today's standard is MA.3.M.1.1. And this standard says to select, which means to choose, and use appropriate tools, choose and use appropriate tools to measure the length of an object, the volume of a liquid within a beaker, and temperature. So when we are talking about length, we're talking about to the nearest centimeter or to the nearest quarter of an inch, okay? When we're talking about the volume of a liquid within a beaker, that would be using milliliters or liters and cups. And for, where is it? For temperature. I was not seeing any specification for degrees Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius, but let's just assume that we'll be using both. In taking on the B.E.S.T, focus mostly on degrees in Fahrenheit because that's what we typically use in the States. However, degrees Celsius could absolutely come into play unless we get some more clarification there. Okay, by the way, this document that I am marking up all over is not something that I created. This is something that the Florida Department of Education provides to the public. So I am just showing you how I use what they provide to break down the standards, to analyze them, understand them in order to create resources that are strategically aligned to these standards with your Taking on the B.E.S.T membership. All right, so benchmark clarifications. It says that instruction focuses on identifying measurement on a linear scale. So there's plenty of connection to the number line, and I love that in the B.E.S.T standards, there's so much emphasis on the number line. It's really helping students to build that number sense, which is awesome. When we're talking about length, we're limited to the nearest centimeter, so we're not going into millimeters, or the nearest half or quarter of an inch. When we're measuring temperature, we're limited to the nearest degree. Notice it doesn't say whether we're talking about degrees Fahrenheit and Celsius, so let's just assume that we're using both. And with volume of a liquid, to the nearest milliliter or half or quarter of a cup, like in a measuring cup. Okay, let's take a look at these connecting benchmarks. What are our horizontal alignment benchmarks that kind of connect with this standard? Well, we've got the FR 1.1 and 1.2 standards in third grade, and those are with unit fractions and the sum of unit fractions. So we will be using fractions when it comes to the nearest quarter of an inch or the nearest quarter of a cup. These two standards also come into play because we're talking about plotting, ordering, and comparing fractions and equivalent fractions, so using that knowledge to help us with the fractions involved in this standard. This says quadrilaterals and talking about perimeter and area, and I think that this comes into play when we are measuring the length of sides to determine the perimeter and the area, and so we'd be using quadrilaterals for that too. So those are related to this benchmark, but that's not what this benchmark focuses on. Okay, so some vertical alignment, where are they coming from? Well, in second grade, they practice measuring length. And in fourth grade, they are moving up to measuring length, liquid volume, and temperature with more precision than what we're doing in third grade. So measuring to the nearest quarter of an inch or the nearest half of an inch, it's really important that we're breaking down those benchmarks on the rulers or on your measuring cups now, because they'll be doing the same thing with more precision in 4th grade, such as measuring to the nearest 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch. So let's make sure that they've got it to the nearest quarter of an inch with this year. All right, so this is the purpose and instructional strategies section, and some of the things that popped out at me were as follows. To choose appropriate tools to measure length, liquid volume, and temperature. The purpose of this is to build their understanding of measuring lengths from the earlier grades. And we're connecting number lines and rulers, because a ruler is kind of like a number line, to the nearest half and quarter of an inch. And it says that this benchmark should be taught with the next one, 3.M.1.2. Notice right here it says that we should allow students to interact with hands-on activities. I wrote here that this is hard to do with video lessons, but we need to be sure to create opportunities for these hands-on activities in the classroom. So even though it's hard to do because I'm not sure what you all have access to with those hands-on materials, and when you print out something, it might measure a little bit differently. So in taking on the B.E.S.T, I'll give you the ruler, I'll give you the centimeters, but make sure you break out those hands-on tools so they get that real-world experience with it. Okay, be intentional about that. I would also mention right here, when we're measuring to the nearest quarter of an inch, with that equivalent fractions benchmark, that we are explaining that 2/4 is also equivalent to 1/2. So make sure that we're doing that. Okay. Common misconceptions or errors. It says that students struggle to identify benchmarks on number lines, can also struggle to measure units of length, liquid volume, and temperature. In other words, it might be difficult for students to identify what the lines mean in between the holes. So we really have to work on what does each individual line mean in reference to the hole that we're seeing. And I'll show you kind of what I mean with some examples when they pop up. Right here it says that number lines should be represented vertically and horizontally. So vertically, like measuring on a ruler, or horizontally, like measuring with a measuring cup, or beakers, or thermometers. Those can be more on a vertical number line. Sorry. Oh, I wrote it right here. Vertically, like thermometers and beakers, and horizontally, like a ruler. This section right here is important to take a look at for that tiered support. So I would definitely suggest taking a look at that there, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to right over here to the instructional tasks. So this is the using part of the standard, using a ruler here, making sure we're lining up with that 0 mark. And then here you can see that this ruler has already been separated into 4ths, but on a regular typical ruler, students need to be also able to identify where that 4th location would be. Using the ruler and also explaining why the ruler is an appropriate tool to measure this pencil. Okay, here's an item involving liters. I think we've seen this before with the Common Core standards in the past, a very similar one. So we're using what we know in Gina's beaker to figure out what we're missing, what is not being labeled in Maurice's beaker right there. Okay, so definitely take a look at that. All right, so measuring using a ruler, measuring liquid volume, measuring temperature. Let's take a look at what you have access to with your membership. All right, so here we are at the home page for the website. We're going to click Members, enter here. Make sure you click Taking on the B.E.S.T. Also make sure that you log in, and we are on 3rd grade, so click that. Also measurement right here. And we're working on our first standard, MA.3.M.1.1. And this leads you to your bronze page. So the bronze, silver, and gold members, you all have access to this page. You can see there's a video lesson right here breaking down measuring length. We've got measuring liquid volume, and you've got measuring temperature, breaking it down just like that. And over here, these are your printable guides. So if we click on one, for example, we'll take a look at all of them in just a second, but you'll notice the video icon right there. what the topic is. We're talking about the tools that are appropriate for measuring length of an object. We're measuring these 3 to the nearest centimeter, which was part of the benchmark, and these 3, A, B, and C, to the nearest quarter of an inch. And you see here how this ruler is broken down, actually I think into 32 equal parts. But this is what you will typically see with a ruler. So really identifying that right here would be 1/4, right here is 1/2, and right here is 3/4. And what I usually teach students to do is to find the halfway point and then find half of that, and then on the other side half of that, and those will be your quarters of your inches, okay? All right, so that's that first one with your bronze membership. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the silver page though, because I wanna show you that when you have the silver membership, you have access to a lot of printables, including those bronze lessons. So let's break down what we see. Okay, so as you can see, again, we've got that video lesson icon measuring length. We just talked about this page, okay? And then with the silver membership, you have extra practice. So very similar to what we just did, measuring to the nearest centimeter and measuring to the nearest quarter of an inch. This gives students the opportunity to practice on their own to master the skill. Then we've got the next video lesson that you'll find in your bronze membership. That's measuring liquid volume. Lists the tools that are appropriate for measuring liquid volume. We talk about that. Then we have for number 2, an item similar to what we just saw when we were breaking down the standard. And here is a measuring cup that we're measuring to the nearest quarter cup. So we talk about that there. And then there's more practice in your silver membership. The next part is to measure temperature. List the tools that are appropriate for measuring temperature. Most commonly, we'll be using thermometers, right? And I told you before that in taking on the B.E.S.T, we're utilizing that degrees Fahrenheit, but to be prepared, that degrees Celsius could pop up because there wasn't anything that explicitly said that we didn't cover degrees Celsius, so make sure you do that. And it's really important that with this one that we're talking about the scales here, because we're not counting by ones, we're actually counting by twos for this one. And it's very important that when you're looking at your measurements that you're checking out the scale, checking out the the value of each unit, each line that you see, each marking. Okay, then we have extra practice number 3. Looks very similar to what we just did. And then here is your math mission where we are putting it all together. So this says that Annette poured 1 3/4 cups of warm water into a measuring cup, and then she poured 14 milliliters into this graduated cylinder. So draw a model of the exact water measurements. So students will have to shade in those 2 amounts. And then in part 2, this is an error analysis problem. It says Annette measured the temperature of the warm water. She says that the temperature is 112 degrees. Explain Annette's error and what is the correct temperature. And there is an answer key for this as well, okay? Then you also have another video lesson with your silver membership, and this is the Math Misconception Mystery Lesson. It's very popular with the students. Basically, what you do is you'll go to this video lesson right here, click play, and I guide you through the entire process. I'll mention that students will solve this problem on their own to the nearest quarter of an inch, and then they will watch as 4 characters, which are really just me dressed up in silly costumes, as those characters solve that same problem, 3 of them making a mistake that students commonly make, and only 1 of them has the correct answer. Then they'll fill out their detective report right there. Okay, and then you have, of course, all of your answer keys right there for your silver membership. And for those of you who are a gold member, you can just click where it says, if you have the gold plan, click here. You can go back to your bronze and your silver resources at any time. And with the gold membership, you have 3 bonus features. You have the mini assessment, you have breaking down the B.E.S.T, which is what you're watching right here, ad-free, right there for you. These videos are also available on YouTube, but they do have ads, so it's a nice little perk to have it right there with the standard and all of your resources for the gold members. And you also have access to McCarthy Math 155, which is which is a big deal. There's a lot for you to utilize there. So let's click on the mini assessment just so you can take a look at the variety of question types that we see. Okay. All right, and there's also an answer key right there for you. And for McCarthy Math 155, this is the daily intervention program that I created that's aligned to the Common Core standards. So because we now have the B.E.S.T standards, not everything really connects, but there are so many skills that do hop over to the B.E.S.T standards that can support you. So let's see. I think, let me take a look. Measurement and data. Look, in this one right here in Unit 9, there's 11 video lessons in Unit 9, and some of those are measuring to the nearest quarter of an inch. And this is great because if you have students, and we have liquid volume right there that we can take a look at. Same kind of deal. You've got the video lesson and the printable guide right there for you. Got picture graphs and all that stuff. But if you keep on going, in this video lesson, we're measuring to the nearest half of an inch. By the way, it's called McCarthy 155 because there are 155 video lessons. So if you are having students who are struggling to identify the nearest quarter of an inch or half of an inch, this is a great way to give them some extra practice in that area. And notice it's kind of scaffolded because the points are already there. They don't have to go and find them, just like the ruler in taking on the B.E.S.T. Here's to the nearest quarter of an inch. We've got some line plots, which aren't really having to do with the standard, but just so you can see. Okay? All right, I think that's it. So I hope that this video lesson helped you to better understand the standard that we talked about today. And now that you know what you have access to with your membership that's strategically aligned to MA.3.M.1.1. Before we go, let me remind you that what you choose to do with your life, it really does matter. Thank you so much for showing up for your students every single day, demonstrating what your best looks like so you can inspire them to take on the best version of themselves. And with that, I will see you in an episode real soon, okay? All right, bye. Okay, so I know that I just said goodbye for now, but I'm gonna ask you to do one more thing, okay? If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with your teacher friends or other leaders in education. That's how I get to continue doing what I love to do, which of course is supporting you all to the best of my ability. All right, for real now, bye.